Slurpty-derp. How's it going, my G's? Hope you're doing super well. Today, I'm very excited because I've got 7. That's right. Can you see them? 7 avocados. I don't know why I'm sharing that information, but basically, I was at the Turkish market and they were like €2 for 7. I was like, let's go. Leave a comment down below. What can I do with 7 avocados? Like, I just don't know what to do. What would you do with them? Just write down below. Anyway, not only have I got 7 avocados, I've also got 7 wicked tips for phase plant today. And they are some sick tips. They are some rhythmical tips. They are some dope tips. They are some fruity avocado flavored phase plant synthesis tips. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So tip number 1 is rhythm creates attitude. And what do I mean by this? I mean rhythm creates attitude. You know what I mean? No, what I really mean is often a really tasty rhythm that doesn't even have so much melodic content can already have like such an impact. So you can start off with having really amazing rhythms and just use one note, and you should be able to get really far in kind of getting an interesting sound before you even get onto like melody and pitching and all that kind of jazz, all that other mother jazz. So essentially, we want to start off by making some really dope rhythms and using some wicked sound design. So let's jump over to phase plant. So I'm going to play you the kind of patch that I've got here, and it's just a simple kind of drum beat that I've made. And yeah, nothing else other than the drums and this synth here called the Wood Funk. And as you can hear, and as I kind of mentioned, it's very textural, but it's very rhythmical, and it's quite complex, but there's not so much going on in the pitch. And this is the idea of this tutorial. I want to just go a little bit more in depth into the rhythms and actual textures and think less about the melody for this one. So yeah, it kind of shows you already. It's already like, it's still really interesting even though it doesn't have much for pitch on it, and it has an attitude to it. And this is what I was kind of saying, like rhythm can create an attitude. So a lot of drum and bass, for example, you could like just stay in one key, but as long as the rhythms are great and the sound design's great, you can still keep the listener's interest pretty well up to a certain point. I mean, we all need a bit of music here and there, don't we? Anyway, let's move on to tip number 2. So tip number 2 with my beautiful avocado, which is a very natural object, is actually that nature provides the key. Nature can provide a lot of nature nurture debate rhythms, and yeah, we hear rhythms all around us, and why not use those as a foundation to create something with? That's why I love resampling. That's why I love resampling real world sounds. And something that I've been getting really into like in the last few weeks or so is just thinking about more simple everyday kind of textures and materials, metal, wood, that kind of stuff. And so let's jump into phase plant, where I've got a really nice wooden texture which has some natural movement on it, and we're going to use that as a starting point for this sound. So I've sourced this wooden texture from one of my sample libraries, and you could go ahead and record something yourself with wood, or you could just search for something, I suppose, or just use any natural sound. But this is what I've chosen here. It's these lovely kind of wooden textures. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little portion of it here and loop it. So set the loop mode on, turn the offset all the way up, and then I can control the length and the start position. Have a nice little selected section here. Turn the level up nice and loud. And I've got a nice little repeating kind of stomping with a bit of texture in it. And yeah, this is just, yeah, like I said, using what is already around us in nature, which already has movement in it, in synthetic start as a synthesis starting point. So it just gets the ball rolling, you know, like naturally. So I like that. And yeah, anyway, let's move on to tip number 3. We're going to use the magic unison mode, which is a thing that I love in phase plant, and it's really over exaggerating everything and making everything powerful and adding more harmonics and doing things that we don't know what it does. And we'll jump straight into the global unison mode in a second, but I just want to explain that when you use this, it can be often a good idea to throw it on straight away on a more simpler sound. So we've just got our kind of wooden texture, and we can already start to see what it does to this sound and then sort of proceed from there. So let's jump in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a sine wave with our texture before we turn on the unison mode. And all it is a default wavetable sine wave, and it's just pitched down to -24. And basically we're going to just put the output of the oscillator 1 into the phase here. So we've got a bit of FM going on. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn on the global unison and see what it does here. So it kind of adds these higher harmonics in the sine wave already, almost sort of pitching it up an octave, and it's making the wood kind of effect a lot faster and higher pitched. So it's essentially, changing the sound quite a lot, but by adding in all these extra harmonics, we're going to have more of a rich sound to play with. And what we can also do is we can use the blend to control the amount of unison, and we can also get this moving, and that's something we really need to do next, and that ties into my next tip, which is about to be explained, tip number 4. So tip number 4 is double up your rhythms. Alright, let's get a double rhythm going on, something that can make a sound a lot more dynamic and interesting if there are two kind of things happening independently from each other, but it's not so crazy that there's like 4 or 5 different rhythms happening, but 2 kind of working independently is still something you can sort of, pick up on the details on without being overwhelmed. So I really enjoy using the natural rhythm as a first kind of starting point, and then using the oscillators and the synthesis to get that secondary groove going on. So let's dive in. So with my sine wave and my wood texture and my unison switched on, I'm going to start to activate my LFO, and it's going to start to modulate a few things here. And the main things are, in this stage, is we're modulating the FM amount, as you can see here. So that FM is going to get a little bit more aggressive on the LFO. I've also going to modulate the frame. So this sine wave sort of becomes like almost a saw wave at points. It sort of goes up and down a bit on the LFO. And also we're going to modulate the blend amount as well. So I'm going to bring this back down. So you can hear now, although it's sort of a little bit, it sounds like it's sort of out of time. If I play it with the beat, we got kind of those double rhythms happening. We got that wood on that sort of repeating choppiness, and then this LFO is sort of doing this offbeat, extra dynamic twist to the sound that's being, formulated or emphasized using the particular parameters that I've selected, i.e. the phase modulation, the FM amount, the frame amount here, and the unison blend. So getting that unison on and off. So that's pumping that rhythm while the wood's doing its thing over here. So we've got these 2 separate rhythms going on. We need to try and make sense of it now. And we can tweak the speeds and things here, for example. So that almost is a bit more of a easy to follow rhythm right around there. But this is a more like choppier, offbeat, and a bit of a weirder speed here. But you can really go about it in whichever way you want. Having the speed selected by ear, though, is quite a fun way to get some more random and interesting grooves you might not have got if you were doing it by sort of the tempo on the grid LFO. Anyway, let's move on to the next point, which is to funk up the LFO phase. Tip number 5, funk up your LFO phase. So what we're going to do here, I've mentioned this on previous videos before, but we're going to modulate the phase position of our main LFO with a new LFO to add in an extra little bit of glitchiness or a little bit of juicy avocado funk somewhere into the fray. So let's dive into the project. So this is going to be quite a subtle effect, But essentially what we do is we add on our second LFO here, and in this guy I can go ahead and draw in where I want this sort of funky sort of effect to come in. So keeping it sort of flat at 0 means it's not really changing anything, it's just kind of staying how it is. But then having this little point where it comes up and down quite nicely, that's where we get this extra timing sort of shift happening, and we can get a bit of funk in there. So if I play this, so you can kind of see how it was slightly different now. It's just changed the rhythm up very slightly. It's given it an extra layer of complexity. And of course, if you tweak the speeds of both of these guys here, you know, you can have infinite combinations. But the idea is to think about it in the sense that, you know, where you're actually, you can see when the LFO comes up here, you know, that's when the effect is happening. So you can almost imagine this as your timeline and think, right, when do I want this funky change in the normal rhythm to happen? So I've chosen to have it happen around here, because I like that kind of with the beat. Dum 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 dum. It's got these like offbeat kind of accents that kind of just work around the drums. You have to really sort of get into the rhythm to start to feel it, because it's quite complex in a sense, so you got to like kind of get into it, but it does kind of fit, and it's a little bit jittery, not robotic. It's a bit like throws you off a bit. It's a weird, complex rhythm, but bear with me. Anyway, the important point is you can use this to get that one step further. Even if you had a more simpler rhythm, you can still use this technique to get a little change to happen here and there along the timeline of your sound. So anyway, that's the LFO sandwich. So let's move on to our next tip. So tip number 6 is to add extra tonality. And this is particularly important when we've got these kind of sounds that are quite lacking a tone in a sense. That they sort of have a tone, but they don't have too much melody or pitch. And even if we're not making like a symphony out of it, we can introduce like an extra sort of tone that gives it a bit more of a feeling that it has like a note, a root note, you know. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this in Phase Plant, and we're going to just run through like a couple of the other effects as well, and then I'm going to talk about specifically these effects that add in some extra tonality and how we use them. So there are two main effects that I'm using here to add in some tonality, and they are the resonator and the comb filter. But first off, let's just add in a little kind of filter bump here. And here I'm just sort of targeting the low mid-range, giving that a little bit of movement on our LFO, and just having that nice little sort of sweeping bandpass boost, if you wouldn't mind me saying so. And then a little bit of distortion on the sine mode here. It gets quite loud there. But that's where I'm sort of really starting to slam in that sine wave together with the wooden texture. Anyway, what I've got here is a bit of dual delay. On a very, very short delay, turned the tone right up, just mixed it in a little bit. And yeah, this is just adding a bit of stereo, quite a lot of stereo width actually. And it does kind of have this sort of delayed sort of tonality to it, so it is actually adding in a little bit of an extra tone here as well already. It's sort of a little bit metallic, but you can kind of hear an extra sort of actual pitch coming out of the sound. And so here's the main sort of thing that I wanted to talk about, which is the resonator. And now I'm playing this note in E, and everything is sort of tracked around this note because it's quite important that it fits, you know, the kind of rhythm. So if I change the note up here, you know, it's going to start making all of my other settings change a bit, and I could do things to keep them in check, but here I'm just concerned with just getting that one E note sounding great, and so I'm not really too bothered about, you know, having all the keys tracked and everything like that at this point. Anyway, you can hear that resonator, what it does really nicely, and I've chosen a B here rather than an E because I want to get a little bit of a chord kind of sound out of it. So B is sort of 7 semitones up, so it's like a perfect fifth. So I thought I'd mix in a bit of that perfect fifth into the sound. So yeah, again, on the mix here, if I just were to bypass this for a moment, which I don't actually know how you do that, but basically I'm having it come sort of on and off on the LFO, and you could do it both ways, and it's kind of up to you if you want to mix it up or down. For this sound, I quite liked it sort of mixing down, so it sort of starts up and then goes down. Anyway, that's adding in an extra bit of tonality. And then another way to add in a little bit more tonality, but also it's not quite, it's a lot more subtle than the resonator. It just changes the pitch of everything as a whole, in a sense, with the comb filter. Obviously, it has its own comb filter effect as well. But what I'm doing is I'm modulating the whole kind of hertz amount on the comb filter. So it's really pitching sort of up and down. Quite a crazy amount. But then I just also mix that in a little bit and put that on the LFO. But if I turn it off, something that happens to the sound that gels it all together nicely. And yeah, it's not as an obvious tonality adding plugin like the resonator is, but it is sort of pitching things together in a way that sort of gels everything together a little bit nicer. Anyway, that's that one. Let's move on to our final tip. So my final tip is something I've always done for quite a while on like a lot of sounds and synthesis and things like that in general, but it works even nicer in phase plant because you have all of these specific plugins that have a spread setting. So what I want to talk about here is adding funk to your stereo. So what we can do is we can, on our sort of main LFO, we can add in a nice bit of funkiness by modulating the spread and the width of these individual parameters on each little plugin. And what that's going to enable us to do, my G's, is it's going to enable us to get the sound to open and close quite nicely along with our funk, and that's going to give it more life in the stereo spectrum, but also it's just going to feel like more alive as well. And yeah, whether you go up and open up on the LFO or close each particular, parameter at that moment is up to you. So you kind of have to test both ways if you're going to go wide to narrow or narrow to wide, avocado to avocado, or shall I just eat avocados instead of talking about music? You need to decide which way is going to be better, and there's never one solution with one size fits all, one avocado fits all. So let's jump in and show you exactly what I mean here. So I've got a few extra effects to add in still here that I haven't showed you yet, but there's already, if you noticed before, already had some modulation on the spread of the Unison. So that's opening and closing in line with our movement on our main LFO. And then we've got also a little bit of spread on the distortion here. A little bit of spread on my delay. And yeah, I'm just sort of opening and closing the sound. It's pretty simple, like what it's doing, but it does make a dramatic difference to the overall feeling of your sound. And here's a non-linear filter on the tubular mode, just refining that sound a little bit more. We've got a convolver, which is mixing up a bit as well, and obviously that's also sort of increasing the stereo image as the reverb comes on and off. You would get a bit more of a realistic room to widen the sound. And then finally, got a bit of distortion here, and I haven't chosen to spread this one, but if I can just show you exactly what I mean again. Does it let me actually? I think I might have run out of have I run out of modulation sources here? Oh dear. Well, if I take one off, maybe if I take this one off, it'll let me add another one. So let's add it on here instead. So you can see if I go up too high, I lose a lot of that power and character from the sound. And let's try it the other way around. So very different effects each time, so that's why it's worth trying both ways. But anyway, I want to go this way, but I just want to go up a little bit. So that's pretty nice. So we've got a really nice, funky, rhythmical, textured bass sound with some added in tonality, a lot of extra little funky shifts and things happening in the LFOs. They can all be changed. To suit your kind of groove, your kind of rhythm. Of course, you could also keep those as they are, and you could change the length of the sample, and you could move this around as well to change our first original rhythm, and you can get some great results like that as well. Almost quite like that one I had for the first time here. And I move this guy around a bit. That's really sick as well. And I listen to these like nice little bits that happen, and then, you know, because it's a lot of chaos, but it's the coolest way we can get the most interesting sounds. So once you've got that chaos into something that sounds great, go ahead and bounce it out like I normally do. Anyway, that's enough for the phase plant tips for today. Hope you enjoyed that. So thanks a lot for watching today, my G's. I'm going to go ahead and eat maybe one of these avocados because I'm very, very hungry. If you like my content, you like the channel, make sure you like and subscribe. And if you want to take it a step further and extend your thanks, you can come over to Patreon and join a wicked group of people in there who are always helping each other out. These guys help me out as well, send me things to layer my snares with and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, also available for one-on-one mentorship sessions. If any of you guys want to take your sound to the next level on a one-on-one basis, you can book in directly from my homepage. Let's go, my G's. Have a great rest of your week. Peace.